The email came on a Monday morning while I was reviewing grant proposals in my home office. Subject: Dad's retirement celebration, guest list. I opened it already knowing what it would say. Dear family. Asterisk, as you know, we're celebrating Richard Valencia's 40 years of service to Harvard's economics department this Friday at the University Club. This will be a formal academic event with colleagues, university leadership, and distinguished alumni. Asterisk. Asterisk, given the nature of the event, we're limiting attendance to immediate family members who share Dad's commitment to academic excellence. We hope you understand. Asterisk. Patricia Valencia. My sister. Always so diplomatic in her cruelty. I scrolled down to the guest list. My brother Daniel and his wife. Patricia and her husband. My mother, obviously. Various cousins who'd graduated from Ivy League schools. My name was conspicuously absent. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Patricia's number. Did you get my email? She asked without preamble. Just read it. So you understand why we can't include you. It wasn't a question. Dad's retirement is a celebration of academic achievement. Would be awkward having you there. Awkward. Come on, Sophia. You know what I mean. All his colleagues will be there. The dean. The provost. People Dad has spent his entire career with. And then there's you, the daughter who dropped out of college to, what was it? Find yourself? I took a slow breath looking around my office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined with academic journals, first editions and research publications. My degrees hung on the wall, the ones my family didn't know about. I understand, I said calmly. I knew you would. You've always been reasonable about this stuff. It's just, you know how Dad is about education. This party is for educated family only. Of course. Enjoy your night. Thanks for being cool about it. Love you. She hung up before I could respond. I set down the phone and returned to the grant proposal in front of me. A promising young economist researching income inequality in developing nations. Exactly the kind of work that deserved funding. I approved her request for $250,000 and moved on to the next proposal. The Valencia Foundation had distributed $480 million in academic grants over the past 8 years. We funded research, endowed chairs, built facilities, and supported scholars whose work might otherwise go unfunded. My father had no idea the foundation existed. He definitely had no idea I'd created it. 3 days later, Friday evening arrived with perfect spring weather. I dressed carefully, a tailored navy dress, understated jewelry, my hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Professional but not flashy. The University Club was exactly what you'd expect. Old money, older traditions, the kind of place where Harvard's elite had gathered for over a century. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings of distinguished members, leather chairs that had probably witnessed countless academic debates. I'd been coming here for 6 years. I had my own key. Dean Margaret Phillips was waiting in the lobby when I arrived. Sophia. She embraced me warmly. Thank you for coming. Of course. Wouldn't miss it. Your father has no idea you'll be here? None whatsoever. She smiled. This should be interesting. The board is already seated. Shall we? We walked through the main hall toward the private event space. I could hear the party already. Conversations, laughter, the clink of glasses. How are you planning to handle this? Margaret asked quietly. Honestly, I have no idea. Well, whatever happens, you have the full support of the university. You know that. I did know that. The board had voted unanimously to appoint me as chair last month. At 32, I was the youngest chair in the university's history. Also the most generous donor. We entered the room and I immediately spotted my family. My father stood at the center of a group of colleagues, holding court, looking distinguished in his dark suit. 40 years at Harvard had been good to him. Publications, awards, tenure, respect. My mother stood beside him, elegant as always. Patricia and Daniel worked the room, playing their roles as the successful children perfectly. The board members' table was in the front corner. 8 distinguished academics and administrators who governed the university. I took my seat between Margaret and the provost. Sophia, Provost Henderson greeted me. Good to see you. You as well. The party continued around us. Servers moved through with appetizers and wine. A string quartet played softly in the corner. It was exactly the kind of sophisticated academic celebration my father had always valued. I watched my family mingle, accepted a glass of wine from a passing server and waited. It took 23 minutes for my father to notice me. I saw the moment his eyes found me at the board table. His expression went from pleased to confused to horrified in rapid succession. He said something to my mother, who turned to look. Her mouth fell open slightly. Patricia noticed next. She grabbed Daniel's arm and pointed. Within minutes, my entire family was staring at me across the room. My father started walking over, his face darkening with each step. My mother followed, looking alarmed. Patricia and Daniel trailed behind. Dean Phillips put a hand on my arm. Ready as I'll ever be. My father reached our table. Sophia, what are you doing here? Good evening, Dad. Congratulations on your retirement. I asked what you're doing here. This is a private event. I'm aware. Then you should know you're not on the guest list. Dean Phillips stood smoothly. Actually, Richard, Ms. Valencia is here at my personal invitation. She's a member of the university board. My father's face went red. That's impossible. I assure you it's not. Perhaps we should discuss this more privately. There's nothing to discuss. His voice was rising. Several nearby conversations stopped. My daughter is not a member of any board. She dropped out of college. She has no business being here. The room had gone very quiet now. Richard, my mother said softly, urgently. Please. No, Linda. This is unacceptable. Sophia, I don't know what kind of stunt you're pulling, but you need to leave. Immediately. I took a sip of wine and said nothing. Provost Henderson cleared his throat. Dr. Valencia, I think you may be operating under some misconceptions about your daughter's credentials. Misconceptions? My father laughed harshly. I know exactly what my daughter's credentials are. She attended community college for 2 years and then dropped out to travel, or some nonsense. She has no degree, no achievements, nothing that qualifies her to be at this event, let alone sitting at the board table. Actually, Dean Phillips said, her voice carrying across the now silent room, Ms. Valencia holds a PhD in economics from MIT, graduated summa cum laude with her undergraduate degree from Columbia, and has published 17 peer-reviewed papers on economic development and philanthropic impact. The silence that followed was absolute. That's impossible, Patricia whispered. It's not, Margaret continued. It's also a matter of public record. Though I understand Ms. Valencia has kept a relatively low profile in certain circles. My father was shaking his head. No, that's not. Sophia dropped out. She's been working odd jobs for the past decade. She lives in a tiny apartment. She has nothing. I have 3 properties actually, I said quietly. A townhouse here in Cambridge, a condo in New York, and a place in San Diego. Though I spend most of my time in the townhouse. Daniel made a strangled sound. This is insane, Patricia said. Dad, she's lying. She has to be lying. I'm not, I said simply. My father's face had gone from red to pale. How? I dropped out of community college when I was 20, I said. You're right about that. What you don't know is that I'd already been accepted to Columbia on a full academic scholarship. I just never mentioned it because you'd already decided I was a failure. That's not. Dad, you told me I was wasting my life. That I'd never amount to anything. That I should give up on education and find a nice man to marry because clearly I wasn't smart enough for serious academics. I never said. You said exactly that. At Thanksgiving dinner 2013. I was 20 years old and you told me, in front of the entire family, that I didn't have the Valencia brain for serious scholarship. He opened his mouth. Closed it. So I went to Columbia without telling you. Got my bachelor's in 3 years, graduated top of my class. Then MIT for my PhD. Finished in 4 years instead of the usual 6. Published my dissertation research in the Journal of Economic Perspectives. It won the Clark Medal for Best Paper by an author under 40. My mother had tears streaming down her face. While I was in graduate school, I continued, I started consulting for nonprofits on grant strategy and philanthropic investment. I was good at it. Really good. By the time I finished my PhD, I'd built a consulting firm that specialized in helping foundations maximize their impact. The Valencia Foundation, Provost Henderson said. which I believe has distributed nearly $500 million in academic grants over the past 8 years. Patricia made a sound like she'd been punched. $500 million? Daniel repeated weakly. $480 million to be precise, I confirmed. To universities, research institutions, individual scholars. We focus on work that might otherwise go unfunded. Economic research, social policy, development studies. My father was staring at me like I was a stranger. 3 years ago, Dean Phillips said, Ms. Valencia approached Harvard about establishing a permanent endowment for the economics department. She wanted to ensure long-term funding for research, graduate fellowships and faculty support. How much? My father asked hoarsely. $120 million, Margaret said. The largest single donation in the department's history. It's funded 12 endowed professorships, 40 graduate fellowships, 3 research centers and comprehensive operational support. Your department, Richard, Provost Henderson added. She specifically requested that her donations support the work you've dedicated your career to. My father sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I don't understand, my mother whispered. Why didn't you tell us? When? I asked. At which family dinner where you all talked about my wasted potential? Which holiday where Patricia made jokes about her underachieving sister? Which birthday where you gave me self-help books about finding direction in life? We thought you were struggling, Daniel said. We were trying to help. You were trying to make yourselves feel superior, I corrected. There's a difference. That's not fair, Patricia protested. Isn't it? When's the last time any of you actually asked me about my life? My work. What I was doing. Silence. You asked what I was doing, and when I said, consulting, you assumed it meant I was barely getting by. When I said I was working on research projects, you assumed it was some kind of hobby. You saw what you wanted to see. But you let us think. Mom couldn't finish. I let you think what you'd already decided. Yes. A new voice cut through the tension. If I might interrupt. An elderly man in a perfectly tailored suit approached our table. Professor Emeritus James Chin, one of the most respected economists in the country. He'd been my father's mentor decades ago. Richard, he said, I think you should know that I've been reviewing grant applications for the Valencia Foundation for 6 years. I've read Sophia's published work. I've watched her build something extraordinary. She's doing exactly the kind of meaningful economic research you've spent your career championing. She never told me, my father said, his voice breaking. Did you ever ask? Professor Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Or did you assume? My father couldn't answer. Dean Phillips stood. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed the full room, I apologize for the interruption. But since we're all here celebrating academic achievement, I think it's appropriate to acknowledge another remarkable member of our community. He turned to me. Ms. Sophia Valencia, our newest board chair and one of the most impactful philanthropic leaders in American higher education. In addition to her transformative support of Harvard, she's funded programs at MIT, Stanford, Yale, Columbia, and 43 other institutions. Her foundation has supported over 2,000 individual scholars and researchers. She began to clap. The provost joined her. Then Professor Chen. Then the entire board table. The applause spread across the room. Colleagues of my father's who'd never met me were standing, clapping for a stranger they'd just learned had quietly revolutionized academic funding. My family stood frozen watching. Sophia, Dean Phillips said, would you like to say a few words? I stood slowly, aware of every eye in the room on me. Thank you, Dean Phillips. I didn't come here to make a speech. I came because this is my father's retirement celebration, and despite everything, he deserves to be honored for his 40 years of dedication to economic research. I looked at my father. He was crying now, silent tears running down his face. Dad, you taught me to value rigorous research, evidence-based thinking, and intellectual honesty. Those principles have guided everything I've built. I'm sorry I didn't share this part of my life with you, but I hope you can understand why I kept it separate. I sat back down. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time. Patricia was crying too. So was Daniel. My mother looked like she might collapse. The party resumed around us, but the energy had completely shifted. People kept coming over to introduce themselves, to shake my hand, to thank me for my foundation's work. My father sat in his chair staring at nothing. After about 20 minutes he finally stood and walked over to where I sat. Sophia. Dad. I owe you an apology. Several, probably. He flinched but nodded. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about your potential, about your choices. Yes, you were. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know either. He pulled out the chair beside me and sat down. Tell me about your research. Please. I want to understand what you've been working on. I looked at him for a long moment. Saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Genuine curiosity. Okay, I said quietly. My primary focus is on the relationship between targeted philanthropic investment and long-term economic development in marginalized communities. We talked for 40 minutes. About my research, my methodology, my findings. He asked smart questions, pushed back on some of my assumptions, engaged with my work the way he would with any colleague. It felt like the first real conversation we'd had in over a decade. Patricia and Daniel eventually joined us, hesitant and apologetic. My mother sat on my other side, holding my hand, crying quietly. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. I just wish I'd known. I wish we'd known. I wish I'd felt safe telling you, I replied. She nodded, understanding the distinction. Around us, the party continued. My father's colleagues came by to congratulate him, to share stories, to celebrate his career. Several mentioned how impressive it was that his daughter was the Valencia Foundation's founder. Takes after her father, one professor said with a smile. My father looked at me. No. She's accomplished far more than I ever have. I just wish I'd been supporting her instead of dismissing her. The evening wound down slowly. Speeches were made. Official recognition of my father's contributions, stories from former students, acknowledgement of his published work. When Dean Phillips made her closing remarks, she added, and we're grateful that the next generation of Valencia academic excellence is already well established. Sophia, we look forward to your leadership on the board. Another round of applause. As people began to leave, my father asked quietly, can we talk? Somewhere private. I nodded. We found a small study off the main hall. My mother, Patricia, and Daniel followed. The five of us sat in silence for a moment. I don't know where to start, my father finally said. Start with the truth, I suggested. Why did you exclude me from tonight? He took a shaky breath. Because I was ashamed. Because when my colleagues asked about my children, I could brag about Patricia's law degree and Daniel's medical practice. And when they asked about you, I had nothing to say. You had plenty to say. You just decided it wasn't worth anything. I know. And I was wrong. Profoundly wrong. You told me I'd never amount to anything, I said quietly. Do you remember that? Yes. You told me I didn't have the family intelligence for serious work. Yes. You made me feel worthless. I know. He was crying again. I know, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. Patricia spoke up. I was cruel too. All those jokes about your odd jobs and finding yourself. I thought I was being funny. I was just being a bully. We all were, Daniel added. And I'm sorry, Sophia. Truly. I looked at them. My family finally seeing me clearly after years of willful blindness. I accept your apologies, I said. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about tonight. This is about a decade of dismissing me, pitying me, treating me like I was a mistake. We understand, my mother said. Do you? Because I built an entire successful life that you knew nothing about. I published papers, won awards, changed academic funding paradigms, and none of you ever thought to ask me about it. You just assumed I was failing. How do we fix this? Patricia asked. How do we move forward? Honestly, I don't know if we can. My father's face crumpled. Please, don't say that. Dad, you literally told me not to come to your retirement party because I wasn't educated enough. 2 days ago. I know. And I will spend the rest of my life making up for that if you'll let me. I stood up. I need time. To process this. To figure out what kind of relationship I want with all of you going forward. Of course, my mother said quickly. Whatever you need. But, I added, I'm willing to try. If you're willing to actually see me. The real me. Not the failure you invented in your heads. We will, Daniel promised. I swear. I looked at my father. Dad. I want to know you, he said. The real you. The brilliant economist, the philanthropist, the woman who built something extraordinary. My daughter. I want to know my daughter. His voice broke on the last word. I felt something crack in my chest, the wall I'd built between us starting to crumble. Okay, I said softly. We can start there. He stood and hugged me and I let him. Let them all hug me, cry over me, apologize over and over. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. 2 weeks later, I sat in my office at the Valencia Foundation, reviewing proposals as always. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Asterisk, read your paper on targeted grant efficacy. Brilliant methodology. Can we discuss over coffee? Asterisk. I smiled. Thursday at 10? Asterisk, perfect. I'll bring my notes. Asterisk. My family hadn't magically transformed overnight. There were still awkward moments, still adjustments, still times when old patterns crept back in. But they were trying. Patricia had called 3 times to ask about my work. Daniel had invited me to dinner to discuss foundation strategy. My mother had started reading my published papers, even though half the economic theory went over her head. And my father? He'd become my most engaged critic and supporter, reading everything I wrote, challenging my assumptions, treating me like the scholar I'd always been. The university had announced my board chairmanship publicly. The backlash from keeping it quiet from my family had been minimal. Most people understood the complicated dynamics of family relationships. My father's retirement had become legendary for the wrong reasons. Or the right ones depending on your perspective. The story of the daughter who secretly funded her father's department while he thought she was a failure had spread through academic circles. Some people thought I'd been cruel, showing up and revealing everything publicly. Most understood I'd simply stopped hiding. Dean Phillips called it the most dramatic board member introduction in university history. I called it finally living my full truth. My phone buzzed again. This time the provost. Asterisk, budget committee meeting next week. Need your input on the new research initiative. Asterisk. I responded and returned to my grant proposals. A young woman in Chicago studying economic mobility in immigrant communities. Proved. A professor in Atlanta, researching the long-term impacts of education funding disparities. Proved. A collaborative project between 3 universities on sustainable development models. Proved. This was my work. This was what mattered. And finally, my family knew it too. The secret was out. The pretense was over. And I discovered something surprising. Being fully seen, fully known, fully acknowledged, felt like coming home.